My brother filed the formal complaint on a Tuesday morning, and I did not say one word in my own defense until the discipline committee registrar opened my professional file at the hearing, read 2 lines, set the folder face down on the mahogany table in front of him, and walked out of the room without any explanation whatsoever. I counted 14 minutes. My brother filled the silence with the quiet confidence of a man who believed he had already won. He straightened his lapels, he checked his watch, he leaned over to whisper something to the committee's opposing counsel, with the casual manner of someone attending a formality rather than a hearing. That 14 minutes was the clearest signal I had received in 32 years that someone was about to have a very bad day, and it was not going to be me. My brother had dressed for the occasion in a Brioni blazer I recognized from a charity gala photograph posted on his firm's Instagram account 3 months earlier. Behind him in the gallery, my parents sat with the composed bearing of people who had spent decades attending events where money and reputation were the primary languages spoken. My mother wore a silk blouse and a double strand of pearls. My father had chosen the charcoal wool blazer he reserved for groundbreaking ceremonies and ribbon cuttings. They looked like they were waiting for the valet to bring the car around, not watching their daughter sit at a respondent's table, facing the potential end of her career. I sat with my hands flat on the lacquered surface of the table and kept my breathing even. I had been practicing controlled breathing for 12 days, since the moment I opened the envelope. When the registrar returned, he did not look at my brother, he looked at me, and in the fraction of a second before his expression settled back into professional neutrality, I saw something I had not expected to see. Recognition, not of me specifically, of what had been placed in front of him, and what it actually meant. My brother was still straightening his cufflinks. He had absolutely no idea the trap had already closed. The envelope arrived on a Friday afternoon in the 3rd week of October. A process server buzzed the intercom of my accounting firm, on Adelaide Street West in downtown Toronto, and handed my assistant a thick manila package addressed to me personally. She knocked on the glass door of my office with an expression I had never seen on her before. Something between professionalism and genuine distress. I excused myself from my client meeting, closed the door, and opened the envelope at my desk. 23 pages. A formal complaint submitted to CPA Ontario, alleging that I had fraudulently obtained my Chartered Professional Accountant designation, that the credentials were forged, that I had operated an accounting firm under false professional pretenses for 7 years, and that the matter warranted both an emergency license suspension and a referral to the Crown for criminal investigation under the Criminal Code of Canada. My brother's name was at the bottom of the cover letter, signed in the confident, expansive strokes of someone accustomed to signing things that other people were required to act on. Beneath his signature were 2 sworn statutory declarations, my father's name, my mother's, both attesting, under penalty of perjury, that they had received notification from my university, that I had failed my final CPA examinations, and that the designation had never been legitimately conferred. I read both declarations twice. I set the pages down. I sat still for a moment in a way that had nothing to do with shock. Shock is a warm, disorienting thing. This was cold, mechanical. The feeling of something long suspected finally confirmed. I picked up my keys, told my assistant to reschedule Monday's morning block, and drove west on the QEW. My parents' home is in Oakville, at the end of a private crescent that my father's company built in 1994. 5,000 square feet of limestone and dark cedar, with a view of Lake Ontario through a stand of old maples. It is the kind of house that is meant to communicate something about its owner. Specifically, that the owner has arrived, has remained, and expects to be treated accordingly. I did not call ahead. My mother answered the door holding a glass of wine. When she saw my face, she did not look surprised. She stepped aside and let me in. My father was in the study, leaning over blueprints spread across his leather-topped desk. He was wearing his reading glasses. He did not look up when I walked in. He had the specific kind of focus that people develop when they have decided, in advance, not to be affected by whatever is about to happen. I placed the complaint on top of his blueprints. He removed his reading glasses slowly. He looked at the document. He looked at me. "You made this necessary," he said. I had prepared myself for denial, for surprise, for some version of a story. I had not prepared myself for the flat, unbothered acknowledgement that yes, they knew, and yes, it was deliberate, and yes, the responsibility in his framing was mine. My mother appeared in the doorway on cue. She placed one manicured hand over her chest and spoke in the tone she reserved for performances, soft enough to seem vulnerable, loud enough for anyone nearby to absorb. She said that my insistence on running an independent practice had always concerned them, that a woman operating alone without the structure of the family business behind her was an ongoing source of reputational risk, that this was, genuinely, for my own protection. My father leaned forward and spoke in the register he used to close negotiations. He wanted me to dissolve my firm voluntarily and accept a role as internal controller for his construction company. My brother would retain control of the company's financial operations. I would serve as a compliance figurehead, visible on paper, contained in practice. I looked at them for a long moment. The two people I had spent 32 years trying to be taken seriously by, now sitting on opposite sides of a calculated plan to erase what I had built over 7 years, without a single dollar of their support. I turned around and walked out. I sat in my car in their driveway for 4 minutes with the engine running. Then I made the call. Rufus was a former OPP investigator who ran a private investigations firm out of a nondescript office park in Mississauga. A colleague had hired him during a partnership dispute the year before and described him as expensive, methodical, and entirely unbothered by complexity. I had kept his card in my desk drawer for no reason I could ever articulate until that moment. He answered on the second ring. We met the following morning at a diner near Pearson Airport, the kind of place where the coffee is bad and no one is listening. He ordered a toasted bagel, black coffee, and asked exactly one question before I had finished explaining. What does your brother actually need the outcome to produce? I did not know yet. He told me to find out, because the complaint was never about me. He was right. I spent Saturday afternoon at my desk pulling my brother's company's publicly available financials. The annual report filed 9 months prior looked clean in the way that things look clean when someone has spent time making them look that way. But I knew how to read past clean surfaces. It was, in fact, the entire point of my profession. The HST remittances did not track with the project revenue. The discrepancy was not dramatic. It was the kind of thing designed to survive a casual review. It did not survive mine. I called Rufus that evening. He had found the same thread from a different direction. 6 weeks before the complaint was filed, my brother's company had received a formal contact from the Canada Revenue Agency's Forensic Accounting and Special Investigations Division. The preliminary estimate placed the flagged discrepancy somewhere between $300,000 and $400,000 in unreported income and misclassified project expenses spanning 3 fiscal years. The geometry of it clicked into place all at once. If CPA Ontario granted an emergency suspension of my license, my client files and trust accounts would require a court-appointed professional trustee to manage them during the proceedings. My client's accounts held substantial funds, year-end tax settlements, 2 estate accounts still in probate, a class action settlement I had been administering for 14 months. My brother intended to petition the court to serve as that trustee. He would have court-sanctioned access to those accounts for the duration of the trusteeship, and a regulatory complaint process is not short, long enough to redirect funds, long enough to close a gap before the CRA's forensic team reached a formal assessment. He was going to bury his own financial crimes inside the rubble of my career. Rufus met me at a coffee shop near my office the following week. He slid a manila folder across the table and ordered nothing. My father's company building used a swipe card access system, a standard insurance compliance requirement for commercial construction operations in Ontario. The physical logbooks from the side entry security station showed my brother's access card used at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday 3 weeks before the complaint was filed. The same night that metadata embedded in the fraudulent documents would later confirm they were created on a computer inside that building. Rufus had obtained a time-stamped photograph of the handwritten visitor register from a maintenance worker who had been passed over for a wage review 3 times running, and was not feeling particularly protective of anyone above his pay grade. The forgery itself had a flaw my brother had either not noticed or had not thought would matter. The document purporting to be a formal notice of my examination failure bore CPA Canada letterhead, specifically, a revised logo and document formatting border that had not been introduced into official CPA Canada correspondence until 14 months after the date printed on the letter. The branding did not exist yet when the document was supposedly issued. Someone had used a current template to forge a historical document, and the current template had given them away entirely. Rufus finished his water, slid the receipt off the table, stood up, and told me he was heading to his daughter's place in Burlington for a few weeks, and preferred not to receive calls on his mobile during that time. Then he walked out into the gray October afternoon. I sat alone in the coffee shop with the photographs in front of me, and a memory arrived that I had spent years learning to set carefully aside. I was 22 years old. My conditional offer of admission to the CPA Professional Education Program had arrived in the mail while I was on a shift at the grocery store where I worked evenings. One of 2 part-time jobs. I was carrying through my final undergraduate year at the University of Toronto, because my father had made it explicitly clear that pursuing a credential he had not endorsed would receive no financial support from the family. I had kept the envelope in my bag all day, and opened it in the parking lot after my shift ended, standing under a fluorescent light. I read it 3 times before I let myself believe it. I brought it home and showed it to my father at the kitchen table. He read it. He set it on the table in front of him, and then he said, without any particular emotion, that I was positioning myself as a competitor to my own family's business interests, and that a family's reputation in the development community was not something to be treated carelessly. He stood up and left the room. He did not congratulate me. He did not wish me luck. He simply left the letter on the table, as though it had been delivered to the wrong address. That moment had hurt for a long time, but hurt, when you sit with it long enough, changes its texture. it becomes something you can use. I folded the memory back down, put the photographs into my bag, and drove to the hearing. The registrar returned to the room after 14 minutes, and the temperature of the space changed the moment he sat down. He stated, for the record, that the letterhead used on the primary fraudulent document contained design elements, specifically a revised CPA Canada logo and border formatting, that had not been introduced into official CPA Canada correspondence until 14 months after the date printed on the document. He held up the physical exhibit beside a printed copy of the archived CPA Canada style guide, obtained from the organization's own communications records. The discrepancy was not a matter of interpretation. He further noted that he had personally appeared in a discipline hearing 3 years prior, in which I served as the financial representative for the respondent. He had observed my professional conduct directly over several days of proceedings. He stated clearly, for the official record, that the professional described in the complaint before him bore no resemblance to the individual he had witnessed operate in that room. The panel form had been asked to believe something that contradicted his direct professional experience, and he wanted that observation documented. My counsel stood. She placed Rufus's photographs on the table, the access card log with the 11:47 p.m. timestamp, the photograph of the visitor register with my brother's handwritten signature on the corresponding date. She invited the committee to formally request the building server access logs. Through standard legal disclosure channels, she invited my brother to dispute the photographs directly and explain what business had required him to be in that building at 11:47 on a Tuesday night. My brother had been sitting upright, performing composure. Then he looked at the photographs, and something in the performance simply stopped functioning. He grabbed the edge of the table and pushed himself to his feet. He began speaking too quickly, too loudly, a simultaneous collapse of several different defenses, tumbling into each other without coherence. He blamed a junior associate at his firm. He claimed the CRA investigation was politically motivated. He turned toward my father in the gallery and began accusing him directly, loudly enough that everyone in the room heard every word, of having designed the entire complaint from the beginning and used my brother as the visible face of something my father had constructed. My father sat completely still. His expression did not shift by a single degree. The registrar's gavel came down once. He directed the committee's legal counsel to contact Toronto Police Service and called a formal recess. 2 uniformed officers arrived 40 minutes later. My brother was escorted from the hearing room with his hands in front of him. His blazer creased, his face the particular gray of someone who had genuinely believed, until that precise moment, that this outcome was not structurally possible for a person in his position. The committee's legal counsel informed my parents that their statutory declarations were being referred to the Crown Attorney's Office for perjury review, and that their personal devices were requested as part of the documentary record. My father began speaking about his 40 years in the Ontario construction industry. He cited relationships. He mentioned names. He used the deliberate, unhurried cadence of a man accustomed to those names carrying weight in rooms like this one. The registrar waited until he had finished. He then noted, with professional patience, that perjury under the Canada Evidence Act carried a maximum custodial sentence of 14 years, and that professional affiliations were not a relevant consideration at the stage of a preliminary referral to the Crown. My father stopped speaking. I set the civil protection order on the chair beside my mother, a document obtained from the Ontario Court of Justice the previous afternoon, and walked out of the building onto Adelaide Street. The November wind came off the lake and moved through the corridor between the office towers. I stood in it for a moment before I hailed a cab. My brother posted bail 4 days later. My father put up a commercial mixed-use property in Etobicoke as surety, a building assessed at just over $2 million. My brother sent a message from a number I didn't have saved. He was confident. He explained that his legal team was preparing a civil claim that would occupy my attention and my legal budget for years, and that I had underestimated the reach of the family's resources. I did not reply. One of the conditions of his release prohibited him from accessing the internet or contacting any party named in the criminal complaint. I knew my brother's relationship with control. Prohibition would not last. The need to manage the situation from a distance would become intolerable within days. I drafted a carefully worded text message to my mother's personal tablet, a device I knew she rarely secured with a passcode, that appeared to reference a confidential internal settlement document from my firm. The message contained a link. The link led to a security honeypot, a tool that logs the hardware signature, IP address, and precise physical location of any device that accesses it, and timestamps the event automatically. 47 hours later, the honeypot returned a notification. My mother's tablet had opened the link at 2:19 in the morning. The physical location registered at the time of access was my father's Etobicoke property. My counsel received the access log at 7 a.m. The Crown had it by 8. My brother had violated 2 conditions of his release: the prohibition on internet access and the prohibition on contacting a named party in the complaint. The motion to revoke bail was granted by 9:15. 2 squad cars arrived at the Etobicoke property at 9:40. My brother was taken into custody with no further bail application permitted. The Crown also informed my father that because the device registered in my mother's name had been used at his property to commit a new criminal act, both of them were under active investigation for facilitating a breach of a court-ordered release condition. The commercial property posted as surety was immediately flagged for civil asset forfeiture, pending resolution of the criminal proceedings. My father had spent 40 years building his asset base with a specificity of attention that he had extended to very few other things in his life. I knew this. I had grown up watching him manage it. I had simply never seen him demonstrate what he would sacrifice to protect it when the moment actually arrived. Standing in his own foyer with 2 officers present, he turned to his son and said, in a voice that did not waver, that he had not placed a $2 million property on the line for my brother's carelessness, that my brother had acted without his authorization, and that he was prepared to provide a full voluntary statement to the Crown, outlining exactly what he knew and what he had not sanctioned. My brother said something in response. My counsel told me later she could not reconstruct it into a coherent sentence. The officers walked my brother out through the front door. My father did not follow. He did not call after him. He remained in his foyer, exactly where he was, already calculating the next move in a game that no longer included his son as a piece worth protecting. I deleted all of their numbers from my phone that afternoon. I went back to my office, made a cup of tea, opened the estate file I had been working on before any of this started, and worked until the building went quiet around me. Then I took the elevator to the lobby, pushed through the glass doors, and walked out into a cold November evening on Bay Street. The city was doing what it always does, indifferent, continuous lit. I stood on the pavement for a moment and let the wind come off the lake. Then I went home. People ask me sometimes how I managed to sit in that hearing room for 2 hours without speaking once in my own defense. They want to know how I could watch the structure of my professional life nearly be dismantled and stay calm enough to let someone else do the talking. The answer is that the work had already been done. Before I walked into that building, I had spent 12 days building a record that did not require my voice to make its point. Evidence, when it is accurate and correctly documented, does not need an advocate in the room. It speaks on its own schedule, to exactly the right person, at exactly the right moment. My job was to stay out of its way. I came out of this with 3 things I did not have going in. The first is a clearer understanding of what family actually is. I had been taught for 3 decades that shared biology created an obligation, that the people you share DNA with are owed a quality of patience and forgiveness that you would extend to no one else. But if a stranger had filed a fraudulent regulatory complaint against me, I would have called my lawyer the same afternoon without a moment of internal conflict. The fact that my brother signed the document did not change what the document was. It only changed how long I had been conditioned not to see it clearly. You are allowed to revoke a relationship that has been weaponized against you. The biology does not override the behavior. It never did. The second is what I now understand about the golden child. My brother was not more loved than me. He was more carefully managed. He was the public-facing asset of my father's investment in a particular story about the family. Successful, unified, intact. The moment he became a liability to that story, my father neutralized him in front of uniformed police officers, without a visible second of hesitation or grief. The golden child does not live in safety. They live at the top of a structure, built to serve the person who designed it. And when the structure needs to be reconfigured, no position within it is guaranteed. I spent years watching my brother's access to my father's approval, and mistaking it for something worth wanting. What I was actually watching was a leash with a very long reach. The third is the thing I return to most often. The only currency that holds its value against people who use institutional authority, family leverage, or financial power as weapons is documentation. Gathered quietly, filed accurately, produced at the right moment, in the right room, to the right person. I did not need to raise my voice once. I did not need to confront anyone publicly or demand accountability in a register that could be dismissed as emotional or disproportionate. I needed receipts, and I had them. When you are dealing with someone who has spent a lifetime perfecting the performance of credibility, you cannot beat them by performing louder. You beat them by being more accurate. My practice has grown. We are a team of 4 now, in a larger space on Bay Street with actual windows and a coffee machine that functions reliably. The people who showed up for me during those 12 days, with food, with parking lot phone calls, with their steady and entirely unperformed presence, are still exactly where they were. I do not take that for granted anymore. The city sounds the same from my office window, but the quiet in my own life is a different quality of quiet, now. It is not the silence of someone who has been told to stay within a certain boundary. It is the silence of someone who has decided where her own limits are, and placed them there deliberately, without apology, without a backward look. If any part of this feels familiar to you, if there is someone in your life who extends their love conditionally, who needs you to stay small in order to stay close, I want to leave you with one honest question. Are you working to earn something real? Or are you working to avoid what happens the moment you stop trying? Leave me your answer in the comments. I read every single one.